Let me just start with the obvious. You have been asked that question a million times, Minister Farrakhan. I just want to ask it as a formality and to get it out of the way, because I don't want to entertain such questions anymore. Are you racist and are you anti-Semitic? I'm coming to you too, Nomzamo Mandela, with that question, and I'll tell you why. I'll motivate later on in the show.
No, I don't consider myself either a racist or an anti-Semite. To be a racist, one would have to have an inordinate love of self, but to put others at a disadvantage for the advantage of self. Now, when a person plays the violin and they play it well, they're called a violinist. When a person is an artist and does their art well, they call them an artist. And when one is a chemist or a physicist or a biologist, the IST on the end of that word means they are completely dedicated, committed, and proficient in that science or that art. To call me a racist would mean that I am dedicated to the uplift of my people, which I am, but not to the point where I would deprive another human being of their God-given right of freedom, justice, and equality. I definitely am not anti-Semitic. I do not hate Jewish people. I have great respect and admiration for them, but I am critical of aspects of their behavior in the relationship between blacks and Jews. And because of their sensitivity, having suffered so much in so many different countries, under so many different kinds of leaders, they're very sensitive to criticism. And when you criticize, they take that to mean you are anti-Semitic.
That's Minister Louis Farrakhan. I told you I have the two most famous black people either side of the Atlantic in the studio with me. You don't achieve that at all. I've been called a racist too, and I'm not gonna waste time defending the indefensible, a charge I don't even entertain. But are you racist, Nomzamo? And are you anti-Semitic?
No South African, genuine South African, can even pose that kind of question.
Are you implying I'm not a genuine South African?
Not yet. I know you are asking a question that is asked almost daily. Let us get this straight. There is a deliberate distortion of those ideals we fought for. What happens is when you are vociferous about the promises we made, about those ideals we fought for, those people we fought against, whom I believe are still in place, distort that to mean if you are an Africanist, as they call us, if you are a nationalist, as they call us, you are therefore necessarily a racist. That is a deliberate distortion to avoid dealing with the real issues that face us today. And if you continue reminding them of their past, if you continue reminding them that we come from this painful past, we are now on this road of reconstruction and development. And if you keep saying, by the way, we made promises, we owe it to the masses to honor those promises, you are indirectly reminding those people who were in fact in possession of the wealth of this country, and they do not want to part with the wealth of this country. So therefore, in order to avoid their responsibility, you get branded racist so that you do not continue dealing with the problems of the poor. Our revolution in South Africa today is a revolution against the poverty of our people. And in order to do so, you have to remind the business sector that it is their responsibility to right the wrongs of yesterday, to help us level those playing fields. And they know there is no way we can level those playing fields, those socio-economic problems of this country, without them. It is them who must do so. And when you speak along those lines, then of course you are a racist, because you are reminding them of the fact that they have a responsibility to part with the wealth of this country, which we are all entitled to, which the poor are entitled to.
You mention Africanist.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people, particularly white South Africans, the word Africanist, Minister Farrakhan, is a swear word. It means racist by any other means. You earlier on said the IST in pharmacist, in physicist, in artist means one who is dedicated to that particular cause. Now, we are speaking of an African Renaissance in South Africa and in Africa, a rekindling of the love of the self, mutual respect for one another, respect for the property and lives of others. That has been received negatively in this country. And one would say in America, in a real sense, the Nation of Islam has embarked on an African Renaissance of a kind. Self-reliance and project. By the way, I need to tell you that 12 years ago, I was in Chicago, and I did visit your headquarters, and I was one of a group of South Africans, still tiny at the time, and I did see the projects that you are involved in, the self-help project. This is what we are about in this country when you hear leaders talk about an African Renaissance. In your understanding, could this be, and I'm addressing this one to you, Minister Farrakhan, would an African Renaissance as envisaged by African academics, scholars, and other intellectuals, would it be a manifestation of racism?
Not at all. I think Mrs. Mandela is very clear. There is fear on the part of those who have oppressed us that a renaissance would bring us to a position of power where we might do to them as they have done to us. Islam touched Europe when Europe was in the Dark Ages, and the presence of Islam produced a European Renaissance, and that Renaissance led to the birth of Western civilization. Nobody says that Renaissance is bad. Renaissance means a rebirth. And this is exactly what Africa is striving for, a rebirth spiritually. That we who gave spiritual and moral values to the world might be reborn again to give these values again. In fact, I believe that this is what Jesus Christ was talking about when he met with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus came to him by night, and Jesus said, "You cannot see the kingdom of heaven unless you are born again." And he said, "Well, how can I, a full-grown man, enter again into my mother's womb?" Well, what we are saying is that as African people, we are entering again into the womb of the knowledge of self, the knowledge of our great historical roots. And in re-entering, we are breaking down a colonial mind, a slave mind, and we're coming to rebirth in the true African mind, the natural mind of the African human being. This is Renaissance. It has nothing to do with retribution. It has nothing to do with revenge. It has everything to do with the rebuilding of civilization.
Would you see it that way, Mrs. Mandela?
I absolutely agree with every word you have said.
You in South Africa, where blacks are the majority, you told us in '94 that we should vote for you because you're going to give us jobs, you're going to give us houses, you're going to give us security, you're going to end poverty. Those that have now won the political kingdom in this country remain in the tin shacks. Those that are supposed to be liberated still live in shanty towns, are called squatters, post from pillar to post in the land of their birth. Is this the price that you were saying to the masses, pay for giving us your vote? I'm going to draw parallels with the Nation of Islam
Yes.
as well.
As you all know, I have had very serious problems on issues such as the ones you have raised now. Perhaps if I had not been the African National Congress myself, as I've said before, I might have suffered severe dents because of, in fact, trying to remind ourselves that we made these promises. We are aware of the fact that government has lots of problems. We haven't got capital. I have had a problem with the pace of transformation, as you know. And what has happened is that when you remind us that even though we are aware of the fact that we have had these problems, we have no capital, we could make adjustments here and there with our policies. You will recall that just before conference, I received a dressing down from my own organization. I was supposed to have called for the reinstatement of capital punishment. I will explain now to you once more what actually happened. We were in a preparatory conference of the ANC and COSATU. And I'm asked by my colleague who was chairperson of this to close that workshop. In my closing remarks, I had observed the deliberations and I felt that we were not addressing reality, that we were not facing the truth in our deliberations. This was a COSATU ANC conference preparing for the national conference in December. I then say in my closing remarks, crime is escalating in the country. What is the answer to this? Why is crime escalating so much under a black government? Why are we having the hijackings we are having? Why are we having the killings we have? Why are these criminals breaking out of prisons as if it's a fashion? What have we done as the ANC government to deserve this? Because it is obviously a challenge to the ANC government. It is an indictment. Beg your pardon. I then say, I quote the case of 2 doctors who were killed in Israel. They were killed by these young criminals aged about 22. And as they were killing them, they say, "Itai malim nga i-time alizasiphi i-amnesty. We don't even wear balaclavas these days because we're going to get amnesty anyway. There's no death penalty.
What they were saying was that the president is a nice man.
He's a nice
and
man.
he will give them amnesty.
Amnesty, yes. This is what they were saying as they killed these two doctors. I then asked my organization, I say, shouldn't we perhaps revisit the question of capital punishment? What can we have in place as a deterrent? If this is what they are translating from this amnesty, and they are killing our people every day, have we revisited this issue? Are we correct in saying one man alone can say, for as long as I'm alive, capital punishment will never be reinstated without putting something else in place as a deterrent? I then went on further to say, on the question of houses, why don't we revisit the question of the policy we adopted?
Out there, if you've just joined us, you are listening to Minister Louis Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, and Mrs. Nomzamo Winnie Mandela. They're right here in the studio with me. I couldn't wish to be anywhere else tonight, I promise you, if you were to ask me. Yeah, we are talking now about what got you into trouble, Nomzamo, with your organization. One would say, for attracting controversy, and that's putting it very mildly, is Minister Farrakhan. She just mentioned crime and punishment as an aspect of her speech that have got her into trouble. And today at a conference, a media conference in Johannesburg, you seemed to say, Minister Farrakhan, that there is a relationship between crime and poverty, and it doesn't seem like the two were being adequately addressed in South Africa, to your observation.
First, I would like to say that politics without economics is symbol without substance. And although Mrs. Mandela promised the people legitimate promises, and the ANC made these promises, they made these promises because promises were made to the ANC that if a peaceful transition could be met, there would be benefits. Unfortunately, these benefits never came. So now what is happening is, little by little, the joy of the South African people over the election of their first black president is gradually being eroded. No one can tell me that the police force in Johannesburg is incapable of stopping crime in the downtown section of Johannesburg. I would not believe that. Now, if you look at the crime, and you look at the fact that this crime did not exist in the numbers in which it exists now prior to the advent of a black government, then what is the underlying message that is being sent here? First of all, I would like to come to what Mrs. Mandela was saying. You see, when you have a truth and reconciliation commission, but there is no atonement for criminal acts against a people, even if punishment is not levied against the individual, the price should be some act of atonement to repair the damage that hundreds of years of injustice have inflicted on the masses of the people. So if you have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, people who have been horrendous in their deprivation of human rights of the blacks of South Africa can say, I'm sorry, and get away with it. What we are not seeing, as we create an atmosphere where the whites would not feel that the blacks coming into power would wreak vengeance on them, but under that you're sending another message, that you can commit horrible crimes and just say you're sorry, and it is all forgiven. So surely the man that is a mugger or a thief in the street, or even a murderer, well, maybe I can get away with this if those who have committed larger crimes can come before a commission and confess and get away with it. So in a sense, you're undermining the very principle upon which jurisprudence is based.
But even the leader of that group of people, let alone coming to the commission to say he's sorry, he's even refusing to do that. And when he is talking of one P.W. Botha, is basically saying to Archbishop Tutu and his commission, go jump.
Well, it is unfortunate that what you have, from what I'm able to see, is poverty that had hope in it because of the emergence of the ANC and President Mandela. And now that hope is diminishing and growing into despair. I came here 2 years ago, and as I got off the plane, a black man met me at the plane wrapped in chains. When I got to the hotel, he was there wrapped in chains. And he was telling me, things have not changed, Farrakhan. We are still in chains. And what I respectfully suggest to the whites of this nation who have been privileged, who have wealth and real economic power, unless the suffering of the masses is eased, then this is going to degenerate into something that could render South Africa, like Liberia or other countries in Africa that suffered from civil war. The last point I want to make is, I have noticed in the United States of America that at a certain point we were happy to elect a black candidate. But under the black candidate, our hopes were elevated. We thought we were really going to see dramatic change. But having a black man in a position of political power while the economics of the city is controlled by others meant that that black man could not deliver on his promise to black people. So now in many of the cities that have had black mayors, there are whites coming up now being reelected. Gary, Indiana is a city that had one of our first black mayors, Mayor Hatcher. And when he became mayor in this steel-producing city, the whites said, we will never submit to a black mayor. They moved out of the city, closed their businesses, moved to the suburbs, built the suburbs into a paradise, and left Gary as a predominantly black city that died. And after years of a black mayor, they finally said, forget it. And they voted for a white mayor. And now that white mayor is able to bring back to the city needed funds to make the city live again. Could that be what is happening here in South Africa? Give you the freedom to elect a black man. The ANC is now in political power, but not in economic power to really fulfill their promises without a close alliance with the white business community and the white business community fulfilling their promises. After a while, the crime increases, the violence increases, and the suggestion is it was better under Botha than under Mandela. And after a while, the nationalists will come back and say, you will do better under us. And there's the end of your political power. It is all right back in the hands of those that you thought you took power from, but all you did was become the manager of a white reality, and therefore you must manage it according to the way they see that you manage it, because you own nothing. We have got to change that equation in order for South Africa to live up to her great potential.
I have said just half of what you have said, and you won't believe the names I have been called. Nomzamo Mandela, you have said essentially what Minister Farrakhan has said. You got into trouble again for saying, is the ANC in power or in government? And you said there was a distinct difference between the two, and of course you had your knuckles right.
Yes, in fact, they were so bent out that I still can't use them. But I believe in the truth I speak, and no one, no matter how powerful, will deter me from speaking that truth. It is very, very costly, I know. I have said before, the ANC is in government, but not in power, and I repeat that. Even to this day, we are still not yet in power. For as long as we do not have economic power, as my brother has just said, we are not in power. We discovered that economic freedom was perhaps even more precious than political freedom. It was not enough to just hoist the flag of freedom and claim we are free, when we in fact could not honor those promises we made, which you asked me about. On the question of housing, for instance, I was going to say, I requested the ANC to revisit the policies we adopted, which you know very well. My brother, here in South Africa, what we have done with our housing policy, for instance, we have said we give our people 15,000 rand, and you know the value of the rand today.
It's just slightly under 5,000 US dollars.
We will give our people 15,000 rand as a housing grant. Now, out of this 15,000, we expected our people to service the land with 7,500, and then they should build a superstructure for 7,500. Now, you can only build a glorified shack with that, and this is what I keep running into trouble about. There is no way that you can build any home for that amount of money. What we have been doing, we said the 4-roomed houses which were built by the previous regime were matchboxes. And this I said in the same meeting, that we built the Boers built our people 4-roomed houses, and we said they were matchboxes. Then, of course, the delivery of these social goods, as far as we are concerned, we are now building them 1-roomed houses where even an ordinary single bed does not fit. It has to be put against the wall during the day. So I was suggesting that the state must not abdicate its responsibility of housing our masses. There is no way that our people will ever enter finance houses. They don't qualify for bonds. They can never ever raise capital to build themselves homes. Let the state rebuild homes, and we go back to the rental system, occupational rent. That's what I ran into trouble for.
And because you repeated it, well, I'm not a prophet. I dare not prophesy that you're going to get into trouble. But I'll tell you what, we will link up by telephone with Minister Farrakhan once she's back in America, should you get into trouble, and say, well, you heard her in your presence, this is what she said. Now that she's in trouble, what are you saying about it? Right, I'll tell you what, in just 5 seconds, we'll be taking a full news bulletin with Ian Crew. And when we come back after 3 minutes of the news, I will open the lines just a bit for 2 or 3 questions from you to Minister Farrakhan and Mrs. Madikizela Mandela. Right. It's the second hour of tonight's edition of the show. I am with 2 very special people, 2 very special guests, 2 people that I'm not even ashamed to say I respect, and respect quite a lot. Respect for their no-nonsense stand, respect for their commitment to their own principles. And as I say, these are the 2 most famous people in black communities either side of the Atlantic. And the one is Minister Louis Farrakhan. He is visiting South Africa right now. He is leader of the Nation of Islam. The other, Nomzamo Winnie Mandela, the mother of the ghettos, the squatter camps, and of course the down and downtrodden. It has been said, and on this show I have often been told by some that yes, we hate that woman, she's bad, she's this, she's that. And I've always said the concern that is being voiced now, for me anyway, and I wrote it again 2 weeks ago before Christmas in my column on the newspaper, said I'm not totally convinced about that concern, for the simple reason that in the 80s we had hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of children, many as young as 10, in prison in South Africa, to the extent that there was an international conference on child prisoners organized in Harare because it couldn't be held here in South Africa. Now, those that are voicing their concern today were very, very deafening with their silence those years back. And I kind of think that it's misplaced hatred. Nor do I believe so much in the much professed democracy or love for democracy. Some of us went to jail and were told that you deserve it. There's no smoke without fire. Something like that. To this day we are still called racists for daring to tell the truth. Winnie Mandela and Louis Farrakhan in the studio. Now we are opening the lines, and this is the number to call.
883-0702.
Right, let me just tell you a little bit about my backup team. Sputnik Ratau is producing the show. Nicholas Friedman is engineering, and Ian Crew is at the news desk. The 4 of us bid you welcome to the show. I'm going to take a few calls. Please keep your question short and sweet, for the simple reason that lines are building up now. Lines are building up very fast, and please try not to ask a question that has been asked, because we'll skip it over. And none of boring, same old, tired questions. If this is the man I know, then he is a self-confessed right-winger, He tries to deny he's racist, but we are going to tell the truth tonight. Eddie, you know that I always say the only requirement for taking part in this show is total honesty. Hello, Machek. All right, little guy. No, she's listening to you. You see, Eddie, I always say that the dangerous guys are guys like you who can speak who can speak the indigenous languages. But anyway, welcome to the show.
I'd like to welcome Lewis Farrakhan. Welcome to South Africa, Lewis.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Yes, Lewis, I'm a little bit worried about this statement you people are saying about poverty. You know,
Eddie, can you please turn down your radio?
okay, let me think. I don't have a radio on, eh?
No, something is.
Okay, well, I promise that
We're having a huge echo. Oh,
better?
okay. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Saying about economic freedom. And that freedom is, do not forget
Yeah.
that freedom
I think
can be
echo
voted in,
is
but
from-
Africa get onto its feet.
So
But the
that's-
whole of Africa's got a sorry story to tell, Lewis. You've got a guy by the name of Keith Richburg in America that wrote this book, and he's worried about it.
Okay.
Yes,
Come on. State your question because we've got a terrible echo. I want you to state your question, and then we'll allow Minister Farrakhan to answer on the radio.
Sure, I say, Lewis, that you can vote for anything, but you can't vote for economic freedom. You've got to earn it. That's all.
Okay.
I
Eddie's comment, and of course the.
Now, I agree with him that economic independence, as well as political independence, must be earned. And I like to use the picture of a fetus growing in the womb. That fetus grows and the womb expands to accommodate its growth. And when the womb cannot expand anymore to accommodate the growth of the fetus, then that fetus must come forth into the world. The umbilical cord is cut and it has an independent existence. It is the same way with economic, political development. We must develop to the point where we can no longer be oppressed, and the oppressor's grip weakens with self-development. Freedom is never given, it is earned. And as long as it is not earned by the process of self-development, you really don't have it.
Right. Eddie, thanks for the call. That was Eddie calling us from Vicksburg, and that's way down in the Free State. Let's go to Cape Town. Line 6. Hassan, good evening to you.
Yes, good evening to you, John. How are you this evening?
Okay, thanks. How are you?
Well, thank you. Actually, it's Saturday.
Yeah, get to the point, mate. We got lots of calls here. Mm. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, Hassan. For a very kind of, that's an esoteric, I suppose, interpretation of that poster. All right. It's about Terra Lekota winning the race for the chairmanship of the ANC. Elizabeth on line 4, good evening to you. Mm-hmm.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. I would just like to ask Winnie Mandela
Yeah.
that why suddenly in Ramadan has she gone into the Muslim community, which I don't think ever been into before. It was always the
wait a minute. Is that your reading of it? I mean, what's the basis? She's now suddenly gone into the Muslim community. She's suddenly putting down the ANC. She's...
I mean, she's saying that the Harvard thing, they're one leg behind it or whatever.
Yeah, how is that Muslim? No, let's get to the basis of your question and I'm trying to get the motivation there.
I'm just saying, all before he was all pro-ANC.
Now,
And now, I would be, whatever, she has to be with them. Now, it's the Muslim community, and I love the fit. I have nothing against Muslims, but why?
if you love them to bits, why would you be worried now that she's with them? I mean, surely that's a contradiction in terms. You could be heaping kudos on her. Yeah, no, she'll talk to you. I just wanted to be clear myself. Yeah, I wanted to be clear myself on your question. There's Elizabeth for you, Numza.
I don't know where she gets that interpretation from. I think you are totally misreading what is going on here. No one has gone into any other community. I will remain a member of the African National Congress to my death, and associating with my brother, my dearest brother, Farrakhan, does not necessarily mean I have gone into the Muslim community. I don't understand actually what you mean by that.
Sorry, I speak because of my understanding.
No, I do understand. And, you know, we have run into trouble over this concept of not wanting to address reality, whoever we are. Talking about reality, the fact that we are putting up one-roomed houses, it is a reality. That is what we could only manage to do, and that is what we have done. Mm-hmm. And the people are saying those houses are glorified shacks. You probably don't understand because you have never lived under those circumstances. I am talking here on behalf of those masses who are downtrodden, who are still downtrodden to this day. We have not managed to afford building them proper homes. And all I was saying was that the African National Congress should perhaps review our policy and build homes for our people who will never be able to afford bonds or enter banks and arrange finances to build themselves homes. It is a reality. Those are the houses we have put up because we haven't got capital. So what is an ANC in that when you speak the truth? It is truth, it is reality.
Mm-hmm. That's 18 minutes past 10 o'clock. If you're clock watching, that's the time. Now, what we are going to do is, yes, come back to those lines, but there's a question that I want to ask Minister Farrakhan before he leaves South Africa, because it is also pertinent to this country's foreign affairs or conduct of foreign affairs. Minister Farrakhan, you got into trouble with the American government and even with the Jewish lobby in America for your visit to Libya and for fostering ties with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Back home, President Mandela recently went to Libya, fostering closer ties with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And with exactly the same entities, he got into more or less the same sort of trouble.
Standing beside a man who was a part of that system that imprisoned President Mandela and gave horrible injustice to his people, if he could stand beside such a man in the spirit of reconciliation to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, Why should he not stand beside a man who, when he was in prison and his ANC was not a legal entity in South Africa, Muammar Gaddafi came to the aid of the ANC and befriended him when America, England, and the government of South Africa would not? Why then should he have to apologize for being a friend to Muammar Gaddafi? And I feel the same way. I think the West and those who have judged Nelson Mandela and Mrs. Albright and others who criticized him still think that we are slaves, still think that we are on a plantation and that we have to get white approval and permission before we act as free men. And what we want to do is to serve notice on the Albrights and the Clintons of the United States and of the world, that never, never again will we allow anyone to tell us who our friends are when you have been our worst enemy and we are trying now for reconciliation with you. So if we can reconcile with people who hung us, burned us, shot us, deprived us, why can't we have friendship with those who have never done these things to us? And if we have friendship with them, keep your mouth out of it. You have nothing to do with who we befriend, since you have never been our friend yourself.
Minister Louis Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, on Talk at 9 at 22 minutes past the hour of 10 o'clock. And of course, with him is Nomzamo Winnie Mandela. Nomzamo, the Xhosa name meaning one who tries very hard, or rather one who tries her level best. Well, trying to get into trouble. Leon, I think you got a problem. Do you?
I don't we have a problem, John.
Uh-huh.
You and I don't have problems.
Right.
We're friends.
We're friends.
And I can't get my name around Winnie's name, but I would like to say hello to her.
She's
Hello,
listening.
my dear.
Hello, Winnie.
Hello, my
Can
dear.
I call you Winnie?
Absolutely.
I know what you went through. You went through years of fear. You're above it. But I object to an outsider calling us weak. An outsider off the radio calling us weak in this country. He doesn't know what any of the we went through. We being you and other people like you. I object to him being on the radio. You I love. He I abhor.
Why?
Why must you say we?
No, I'm saying why. Leon, it's John here. You say you abhor Minister Farrakhan being on the radio, being in South Africa, he's not one of us. Now I may ask, if you say you object to him saying we, and then you say he is not, okay, give me a chance, Leah. No, wait a minute. No, we're not fighting. I need to ask you a question. I gave you a chance to state your case. Now I need just to clear one thing before Winnie Mandela responds. Oh, okay, can you give me a chance now? You say you object to him saying we because he is not one of what you call us. Now you say us. By us, who exactly do you mean? I see. And
May I
you
respond?
say Minister Farrakhan is not an African?
May I please respond?
Yes, please. Okay.
South Africa was under oppression for 40 years or 48 years. We walked out here
May I?
Oh.
to talk to us.
All right, Leanne. I'll put you on hold. I haven't cut you off because you won't allow us to come in. So let's give him a chance to respond.
Perhaps later this year, President Clinton will visit South Africa. And maybe President Clinton, as an outsider, might give some counsel or advice to move the economy forward, to lessen the tension in the society, and identify with the problems of South Africa, since America has similar racial problems. And in identifying with suffering, you can say we. If you are a woman and you had a baby, and I were a woman and I had a baby in America, and I identified with the pain of your childbirth because I understood that pain, I'm very qualified to say we. John Fitzgerald Kennedy stood in Berlin and said these words, Ich bin ein Berliner. He identified with Berlin because of the separation of a wall that divided them. He wanted to identify with those people of Berlin. He's applauded for that. Now, my dear, you are an African. How long? Where did you come from? Did you come? Madam,
But you said
madam,
so. But you said so, Leanne. You said
Madam.
we in identifying with Winnie Mandela. But can you answer?
well, miss, I come.
I think we are bringing the standard of the debate much lower.
But I would like to
Yeah.
respond, because in the United States of America, we had our own system of apartheid called Jim Crow. And we couldn't go into this place or that place. We couldn't go to toilet in certain areas. We couldn't be buried in the same burial ground with whites. We saw our people lynched and burned at the stake. So when I say we to Winnie Mandela and to the blacks of South Africa, I say we because I am an African. I didn't choose to go to America. I was forcibly kidnapped from Africa and brought to America. You and your parents decided to come to Africa, and now you have adopted Africa as your home. I never left Africa as a home, and even though I live in America, I identify with the suffering of my people in Africa. So I'm more qualified, my dear, to say we to Winnie than you are, because you yourself have never suffered like Winnie. You have never been in the townships living like Winnie and her people did. She already told you in her talk about housing that you never lived under the circumstances that the blacks in the shanty towns live under. So when you say we South Africans, who are you talking about?
Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he is the leader of the Nation of Islam, right here with me, John Kwelane, live on Talk at 9, and of course with Winnie Nomzamo Mandela. Winnie Nomzamo Madigizel Mandela. Is it Olga online too? Is it Olga? Or Ogla? Oh, all right. My apologies for... Thank you.
I want to say I am also angry because Farrakhan is
Now, before you do that, we won't cut you off. We'll allow you to talk. I want to know why, before you move to your next point, let's finish with this one. Why you say he is stirring racial hatred? I mean, I don't feel it.
Well, I do.
Yeah, how, sir?
If you listen to the tape, you wanting to hear what you want to hear.
Maybe you want to hear what you want to hear, Ogla. Maybe you are hearing what you want to hear.
No, I can tell you, John, I am an African.
No, wait a minute. Why is it that your version of what he is saying is necessarily correct and mine is not correct? Your version that you don't want to hear what you want to hear is correct, but with me, I must be hearing what I want to hear. Well, I mean, no, wait a minute. Let's try to disabuse you of that kind of thing. But before we do that, why do you necessarily think your interpretation is a lot more credible than my interpretation? I'm saying I feel no racial incitement at all.
Okay, but that is how I feel.
Okay, why do you say so?
Because I feel, I get a vibe coming through that he is spewing hatred, and I feel very strongly about it because I am an African. I was born in Africa. I was born and I was bred up here. Now, in Zambia, that's where I come from. The people there went through the same circumstances
Why did you leave Zambia?
because my mother had to leave.
Why did she have to leave?
Because they were killing people.
I see. Could it be more like, I don't know when they were killing people in Zambia? I'm a student. I'm a student of African history. I'm a student of contemporary Southern African history. There never was a time when, if you are talking Kenya, maybe, even then, highly qualified. But if you are talking about Zambia, it was one of the smoothest transitions from colony to independence. And I dare you to give us examples. It never happened. Tell us exactly why you came down here. Was it because there was now a black government in power?
I came before Black came into power. I came to South Africa while there was still white colonial rule.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother remained there. She was a single woman on a farm, and they were killing the farmers around her, and that is true.
They didn't.
I grew up there. My mother was there for years after they left, and eventually she could not cope anymore, and she left. So therefore, I
Well, that's your version. You see, again, we disagree very strongly on versions because, but I wouldn't, I really wouldn't bother if, quite honestly, on a matter that is fundamentally untrue, I'd rather go to the stake, and I'll go laughing. You see, but the truth about it is that it never happened. The time you're talking about, I'm not calling you a liar, I'm saying your version is untrue. Not you, your version is untrue. The period you are talking about, my dear, of transition and that colonial rule, it was still called the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. You don't. No, I'm sorry you don't, and I'm going to disagree with you. But anyway, Ogla, we will disagree. We are here together forever. Let's allow Minister Louis Farrakhan to come in on that point. Okay.
In Zambia, when the transition took place there, you say went smoothly. I agree.
It can be both. It can't have been violent with farmers being killed and then be smooth, and you agree. Make up your mind now, Ogla. Well, it...
Prior to the takeover by Kunda, when the violence occurred. And when the... Hello?
I'm listening.
Okay, and once they were taken over, the transition went okay. The poverty in Zambia today is terrible. Really, really bad. Far greater than here in South Africa. Yet, the crime is not as bad as here. Now, I would like Mr. Farrakhan, he maintains that crime and poverty go together. Okay, they do break in, they do steal, but they do not kill, they do not rape, not to the extreme that we have in South Africa. And I would like Mr. Farrakhan to please explain that place.
Can you stay on the radio? Yeah, just hold on.
Another thing I would like to say, Mrs. Mandela,
No, can you hold on, please? I mean, let's take them one at a time now. Yeah, just stay on there. Minister Farrakhan is coming.
First, I would like to respectfully say that truth is either right or wrong. If I'm speaking truth, I'm not speaking hatred. If I'm speaking false, I'm speaking false. So the question that you have to ask and answer is what Farrakhan's saying the truth? The real hatred, my dear, is this. When we deprive another human being of unalienable rights that God intends for that human being to have, you are creating hatred in the hearts of those whom you deprive. The blacks in South Africa have been deprived not by Louis Farrakhan's words, but by the deeds of white South Africans. In this time of truth and reconciliation, you're going to have to come to that truth and recognize that the reason you have advantage is because injustice was done to the indigenous people of this land. And now, in order for reconciliation to take place, then justice has to come to those who were deprived of it. And when I speak truth to the principle of justice, this might cause guilt in the hearts of those whites to think that Farrakhan is trying to stir up black people against white people. That is not my aim at all. I'm trying to stir truth to the principle of justice, that real reconciliation may become a reality. Now, I grew up in poverty in the United States. Poverty didn't mean crime to me because I had a mother with great character, and she taught me righteous principles. And I was poor, but I would never steal. I was poor, but I would never rape or rob or kill. So poverty is not necessarily an excuse for criminal behavior. This behavior that is now seen in South Africa must be studied. There is, however, statistics that point that poverty is linked to crime. In some ways, people who are poor, if I am hungry, don't tell me, thou shalt not steal, because the first law is the law of survival. So if a person is hungry and they have no means of subsistence, they will steal. So that's crime. But that's crime based on the will to survive because of extreme poverty. I think if we can end the suffering of the South African people, we can go a long way toward ending crime.
That's Minister Louis Farrakhan laying it on the line. And I just want to think that, okay, we are taking that sport break. We'll do that right away, Nicholas. It's just that I think my intelligence is being insulted. If I can be told that Louis Farrakhan is here to incite racial hatred in me, it implies that I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid that I assume everything is hunky-dory around me and I need to import Louis Farrakhan to come and rabble-rouse. And tell me, if I wear the shoe and it pinches, I'm the one feeling the pinch. I'm not going to need anybody to tell me that, hey, but the shoe you are wearing is pinching you. If you are telling me that I need to be incited, funny enough, I'm damn sure that if I were to do a poll on this show now and say, right, let's take a poll. How many of you feel incited by Louis Farrakhan and how many feel Louis Farrakhan is inciting? There's no prizes for guessing which side of the South African population will echo Douglas' words and which side of this population will echo me. It's 20 minutes to 11 o'clock. We are coming back. And we are having two very special people in the studio. Minister Louis Farrakhan, a leader of the Nation of Islam, and Nomzama Winnie Mandela. Well, if you have seen a squatter camp, you have seen Winnie Mandela. Sandy, good evening to you. Mm-hmm.
No, I believe that this is the region of each names. What we need.
Wait a minute, what do you mean by that? I'm not sure I'm with you, Sandy.
Each tribe needs different things. Now, what we need is look to see I want to know, very simple question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how this can be done with the birth rate that we've got, and more especially looking at the
A good question. Quite honestly, Cindy, that's a very, very good question. And one of the things that has bothered me, anyway, the politicians will answer you. I'm a mere journalist, but if you've seen what I've written in the past, I've actually asked politicians to preach this to their constituencies. I've asked religious leaders to take to the pulpits and warn against unchecked birth control, birth rates. I've asked trade unionists to talk to their members, trade union leaders. I've asked teachers spread the message among their pupils' parents, because if you have numbers that you can cope with, then at least you know X amount of mouths can be fed, sanitation services can cater for so many, etc. You can plan well in advance. But I'm saying I'm in full agreement with you, Cindy, with that question. Let's hear the politicians. Thanks, Cindy. Right on.
Well, I personally, I understand people talking about limiting births. But in the United States, birth control was aimed at black people, fertility drugs aimed at white people, because the birth rate of blacks was greater than the birth rate of whites. They said that the birth rate of whites was at zero birth rate, meaning that for every one birth there was a death. But with the blacks, they felt that we were having, not they felt, they knew, the demographers knew that we were having a greater birth rate, and they felt that if this continued, by the year 2053, the blacks in America would be the majority population, or at least equal in population to the whites. Now, this kind of statistic sent shivers in the spine of the racists, because that would mean that by the middle of the next century, "Run, Jesse, run" for president wouldn't be a slogan, but it could be a reality if we became the majority. Already now in South Africa, we outnumber the whites 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. It's more than that. Okay, now when you have a great youth population, you have those who are fighting age and working age. And when you have no jobs and no war, then you have the volatility of youth. Without guidance and direction, you have a social problem. And I think that when whites talk like this, they want us to control our birth, but they don't want that for themselves. And I really think that as the Quran teaches and as the Bible teaches, man, I don't see any worms in any worm line for food. I don't see any birds in any bird line for food. I don't see any creature that God created on this earth that has not the ability to provide for its young. And here we are, the greatest of God's creation, sitting around begging and looking for somebody to do for us what we could do for ourselves. If this country, with the square mileage that it has and the arable land that it has, only has 32 million people, you could support 4 times that number of persons if you were more productive. So let's talk about production. Let's talk about job opportunities. Let's talk about increasing the opportunities for the masses, and then let the people determine how many children they're going to have. But I don't like the oppressor or the former oppressor telling me that I shouldn't have more babies because I might end up having so many babies that I just baby myself right into power over my oppressor.
Wow.